Hello, I'm Micah Smith with Denver 7 and welcome to Denver Decides. This community partnership is dedicated to accessible and transparent elections. The partnership includes the League of Women Voters of Denver, Inter-Neighborhood Cooperation, and is presented by Denver 8 TV. Our mission today is to present a ballot issue forum in anticipation of the general election coming up on Tuesday, November 3rd. Among the numerous amendments and ordinance questions on this year's ballot are two measures pertaining to Denver public schools. They are referred measures 4A and 4B. In the first half of this forum, we will examine 4A, which asks voters, shall Denver public schools taxes be increased by up to $32 million tax year 2021 and by the amounts in any year thereafter that are raised a mill levy of 4 mills. We will examine and discuss 4B in a few minutes. Our format for this forum will follow a basic debate outline with opening and closing statements, cross-examination, and will include responses to questions submitted by the forum organizers. Let's begin by meeting the participants who will present and discuss the pros and cons of referred measures 4A and 4B. Beginning at my right is Rob Gould, a national board-certified special education teacher and is the vice president of the Denver Classroom Teachers Association. And he will be speaking in favor of referred measures 4A and 4B. And on my left is the Honorable Dr. Arturo Jimenez, former DPS school board vice president and current DPS parent and author. He will be speaking against referred measures 4A and 4B. Welcome to both of you. We've got a lot to cover, so we'll get to referred measure 4A first. We'll begin with 1-minute opening statements from both speakers. Rob Gould, you're up first speaking for referred measure 4A.
Thank you, Micah. In 2019, the citizens of Denver spoke loud and clear when they stood behind the teachers and said enough is enough. They were tired of the experimentation in politics that had dominated Denver schools for over a decade. Denver voters reaffirmed their commitment to supporting schools when they voted for our new school board. Our new school board has been laser focused on making sure that students have what they need to learn and that the people who support those students have what they need to live. The mill levy investment will increase wages for our lowest paid workers. It will add additional compensation for our educators. It will add mental health services, allowing our teachers to better focus on teaching. COVID will be with us for some time, and this investment will add nurses at a time they are so desperately needed. The mill levy will expand special education services to include more paraprofessionals and speech-language teachers. We need to invest in our students and teachers. Vote yes for Measure 4A.
And now the opening statement from Dr. Arturo Jimenez speaking against referred Measure 4A.
Good evening, and thank you very much for having me, and thank you to INC and to the League of Women Voters for sponsoring this forum. I'm a DPS parent. I have a child who is a special education child, also children, all of them have been in as English language learners and receiving services and have gone to Title I schools. My mother is a paraprofessional at one of the elementary schools currently, was formerly a bus driver, and my father was, of course, part of Local 720, the Laborers Union, Local 55 Carpenters, and the Tile Setters Union. And I thank you very much for having a diverse speaker come to speak on this initiative. Oftentimes the families and children of low-wage workers within the district are not asked to do this. I stood by the teacher strike, marched with Mr. Gould,
and thank you, Dr. Jimenez. Your time is up, unfortunately. But now you will have 30 seconds for a rebuttal to Mr. Gould's opening statement. You may begin.
Thank you. And so having stood by the strike and voted for the school board, I still have to give pause in terms of raising our taxes and increasing our debt from $4 billion to $5 billion under the CAFR. I have grave concerns about how this will affect people on fixed incomes, how it will cause raised rents that would negate the small raise that some of the educators would receive in the district. And I look forward to hearing from Mr. Gould on those issues.
And Mr. Gould, you now have 30 seconds for a rebuttal of Dr. Jimenez's opening statement.
Thank you. Arturo, it's great to see you again. And yes, thank you for supporting us through all of that. And really look forward to tonight in the debate, and looking forward to thinking about all the different ways we can support our students and support our workers, especially the lower wage workers in DPS. So looking forward to going through that with you.
Now for our cross-examination rounds, beginning with Mr. Rob Gould. You may ask Dr. Jimenez a question, and Arturo, you will have 30 seconds to reply.
So Arturo, good to just I think the first thing that's off the top of my head is just we've worked together for a long time, and I guess how would you justify your opposition with our labor partners, like those low wage workers we've been talking about that make less than $15 an hour, and the teachers whose wages are contingent upon successful passage of the bond and mill levy?
Like many, such as at the INC and other folks in the city, we've seen that DPS has failed to tighten its belt, being top-heavy at the administration, by not sending central staff to the classroom, by failing to show up to deal with city council meetings and others where tax increment financing taken from the school fund has gone to other projects in the city. Also, we've seen that the school board and the districts have failed to access the marijuana monies that were promised to the schools. So many of us ask, how else can this be paid for? Thank you, Dr. Jimenez. Your
time is up. Now, you may ask Mr. Gould a question, and Rob, you will have 30 seconds to respond.
DPS holds $100 million in reserves, which is about 10% of they actually have a $1.4 billion budget, which is comparable to the city and county of Denver and more property than the city and county of Denver. They're only required to have a 3% reserve. Why not have some of that $100 million, maybe even just 50 million of that, which would still leave them at a 5% reserve? Why would that not be used for the general fund shortfall this year?
I'm glad you asked that question. Actually, I've asked that question myself a few times over the years. And one of the things that I know is that we have a different school board. We have a different school board that's really here to support our students. In fact, this last year, we went through a budgeting process where we actually talked about the budget over the summer because we knew that the COVID crisis and everything happening was going to affect it. And DPS is actually dipping into those reserves this year because of that process.
Let's continue with cross-examination, and this time, Arturo, your turn to ask Rob another question, and Rob, again, 30 seconds to reply.
So, as I mentioned, that there might be other funds that could be available to cover the needs and the costs in the mill levy, including wages for workers and mental health and nursing. If we could find other funds, we could avoid that $6 million to charter schools that they would be guaranteed under a tax increase and mill levy. Why should we continue to subsidize these private corporations with public dollars?
Thank you for that question. Yes, I continue to be concerned about that as well. But one thing that I remember often is the fact that there's students in every school, and every student in DPS deserves a school that is open and welcoming and has all of the things that they need in that school. Things like computers, right? Especially now. Things like buildings that actually work, HVAC systems that actually work. And so this will help to support all of our schools.
Now, Rob, you may ask Arturo a question, and Arturo, you will have 30 seconds for your response.
Arturo, we just curious of how would you justify your opposition to both the bond and mill? We have 6 city council members and 7 Denver area state representatives. We have also 3 state senators, the Denver Classroom Teachers Association, CWA, and other labor groups that have all endorsed the bond and mill. I guess, how do you justify that?
I think sometimes the district pulls a sleight of hand when we pass or ask to pass mill levy and bond raises. You see that we have a large building, a 14-story central office administration that was supposed to be a new school, and instead the central administration, a bloated central administration, received new offices. We see issues like at Corey Merrill C3 just recently. They were supposed to put $1 million into safety and security, and instead it went to office space. And just recently, a stranger who was high on substances
Thank you,
walked
Dr.
into the
Jimenez.
school.
Your time is up. Our next couple of rounds will feature our speakers responding to questions submitted by our forum organizers, and they will have 1 minute for their answers. Mr. Rob Gould, who is here speaking in support of Referred Measure 4A, you will be first to answer.
Okay.
In California, charter schools have been ruled to be private schools that are publicly funded. Do you think charter schools should be reclassified as private in Colorado? Why or why not?
So I think that's an interesting question. I'm not. That's in terms of like where to go with that. I think we've got a lot of work to do with our charter schools and how they do pull money from our public school system. You're absolutely right. I think right now we need to continue to have that conversation. Right now, when you think about the bond and what it will do for our Denver students, I mean, we have our buildings are on average, I believe, 52 years old, and so they need support, right? They need some additional work done. The bond will actually support with the maintenance of those things, whether it be boilers, whether it be HVAC systems, right? We also have a majority of many of our schools, I should say about 50 of them, don't have air conditioning. This bond will actually support our schools. We'll have 24 schools with air conditioning because of it.
And now Dr. Arturo Jimenez, who is speaking here against Referred Measure 4A, your response to that question.
I spent 8 years on the school board, and every year I asked us to change the start date of the school year to after Labor Day, which would save us not only energy costs, but also would alleviate many of the very high temperature classrooms that we see in the district. I see that in the mill levy there's supposed to be a line item for or in the bond there's supposed to be a line item for air conditioning. I know we're going to talk about that, but every 4 years we're asked to fund air conditioning, and it still seems that our students end up in schools that are too hot for the teachers to teach, too hot for the students to learn, and oftentimes we're given answers that there's just cooling solutions instead of actual air conditioning. So, this goes back to 2008 when I was first on the board, that we were promised air conditioning. I wonder what is going to be different this time.
Next question from our organizers for our guests, and Dr. Jimenez, you will respond first, and you have 1 minute to answer. It has been said that PTA fundraising at affluent, mostly white schools contributes to inequity within DPS. If this bill passes, will parents get a reprieve from fundraising with the added benefit of leveling the financial playing field across all schools?
My answer is that no, we absolutely will still have to fundraise as parents. I'll still need to help fundraise for the arts and music and after-school programs that my daughters in elementary and now in high school access. So I don't see us having to stop doing bake sales to raise money for teacher training, to raise money for the air conditioning units that we tried to donate to a couple of the teachers. This year, I still see that we're going to have to continue and maybe ramp up our efforts due to the issue in the economy and the tough times that teachers are going through since they can't live in Denver.
And now, Mr. Gould, your response to that question.
So you bring up some great points, and the point that our teachers do have a difficulty living in Denver, that's absolutely right. In fact, what really scares me about if we don't pass this bond and mill is the fact that we will need to continue to support our schools. We will need to continue to fix our schools to make sure they're safe. And so as that money starts going into other places, it's going to come from other things, including teacher salaries and also and services for our students. And so I do hope that people realize that it's all a big picture. We haven't been able to fix funding in Colorado for a number of years, right? We're still we're 42 out of 50 in education funding. We spend, we have on average, we have $2,000 less than the national average, right? That we get per pupil. That's $2,000 less. So we can't stop. We can't take our foot off the gas right now. We need to keep going full strong because our students need it, our teachers need it, and it's better.
Let's continue with questions submitted by the forum organizers, and Rob, you will respond first. You have 1 minute for your response. From 2010 to 2019, student enrollment has increased by 19%. During the same time period, the revenues of the district have increased 65%. This data was found on DPS financial reports. Given the ratio of enrollment to revenue, why does DPS need more money?
Well, in terms of why we need more money is we're always doing more with less, right? So we're always in this conundrum of things cost more, right? Everything in terms of fixing our schools and supporting our schools costs more money. We've had to buy a tremendous amount of computer systems for our students. We've had to upgrade security systems for our students. There's a number of things that do that. I'm proud to say that one of the biggest costs in the last 2 years has been our teachers and our SSPs, our specialized service providers, psychologists, social workers. That cost has increased because of the wonderful work we were able to do with the Denver teacher strike and fixing those systems. Now, because of that, right, we have this influx. We actually have been able to keep teachers in Denver. We went from 1,200 teachers a year gone to 900, and now it's 600 or less teachers that we've actually had to hire this year. It's amazing the work we've done.
And now, Arturo, your response to that question.
And I thank all the folks who've worked really hard to try to alleviate those issues in the district. However, there's still many other reasons why the revenue in DPS has gone up. We've had, with this, if this mill and bond levy is passed, we will have approved over $2 billion to the schools. While we've supported a bloated administration that built themselves a huge administration building downtown at the expense of children, and the revenues do not match the increase in students and the services that are provided to students, even though some people have worked hard and there are some good people out there. Much of that money has been diverted, including from safety and security. So my fear is that we'll continue to have your same fears about safety and security and about issues for teachers, even if we pass this bond and mill. But the charter schools will receive the windfall.
Jimenez. Your time is up. In our final round of submitted questions, and Arturo, you will be the first to answer. DPS didn't send any board member or officer to a recent city council meeting to advocate for the redirection of $33 million away from the 16th Street Mall and back to kids. Instead, the DPS leaders abdicated to a third party. How is this consistent with DPS leaders' fiduciary responsibility to Denver's taxpayers?
Well, I think their absence at the city council meeting to even have the discussion about how to utilize taxpayer increment financing, which takes that money away that the taxpayers have paid through their property taxes and mill levies, and gives it to developers to use for development, such as and maintenance, like on the 16th Street Mall. It just shows that, and they're not here tonight either. They've been absent at many forums. The treasurer, Angela Cobain, should be here, should be talking about this issue. The president, Dr. Carrie Olson, should be here. The superintendent, Susana Cordova, should also be here. And I appreciate that they sent a wonderful teacher here to speak on their behalf. But I think they need to answer for the more than $700 million of bond debt and of the other $32 million of mill levy money that is going to be shouldered by the district during the time of COVID.
And now, Rob, your response to that question.
So I don't know if anybody's noticed, but we've been in the middle of a pandemic. I know it's been difficult. I mean, we're teachers, I know the school board, I know everybody has been working around the clock, evenings, weekends, everything. I don't remember when I stopped working this summer, and the same goes for everybody downtown. I think that the important difference is the fact that we're working together, and actually I think I'm the proof of that difference. I am the vice president of the teachers union, and they actually asked me to come. They asked me to come and represent, because not only are we working in partnership, But, you know, we all realize how badly we need this money and why our students and what we need that money for our students, right? And so I think I totally get the criticism, and I think it's really up to all of us to make sure that we continue to hold each other accountable. And, you know, teachers are now in the room, and we will continue to do that.
And that brings us to the end of our Q&A segment for Referred Measure 4A. We will get to 4B in just a moment, but we move to closing statements, and we will reverse the order of the opening statements, which means we will begin with Dr. Arturo Jimenez. You may have 1 minute for your closing statement on 4A.
Thank you very much. And again, thank you for having this forum. I'd really like to ask the taxpayers, including seniors who are on fixed incomes, and those who are worried about having to raise rents and seeing teachers not being able to afford to live in Denver, and ask you not to vote based on fear or on generalizations that this is about the children, when it's really about the financial transparency of the district. And ask those questions: what are the other funding sources that exist? And why do we have a booming marijuana industry right now, where we voted that if we approved and legalized that the money would go to education, and the schools have not seen a cent of it? How come our leaders, administrators, and absent school board members are not asking those questions of the state legislature? I think that those questions have to be answered, and as soon as they are, and I believe they can be, next year I think we can ask the taxpayers to perhaps fund a mill levy after we've tightened our belt, after we've taken those bloated central administration jobs and moved people out to the schools, after we've really looked at other ways of tightening the belt in DPS and asked about their $100 million reserve.
Jimenez.
Thank you.
And now a closing statement from Mr. Rob Gould. Rob, you have 1 minute for your closing statement on 4A.
Thank you. You know, COVID has really turned our world upside down. At times we've all felt out of control and frustrated because we can't control what happens at the state and national levels. But one thing that we do have control over at our local level is investing in our kids. A vote for the Denver mill levy 4A is a vote to support our students and for now and also into the future. We've seen firsthand the effects of this pandemic. By approving these funds, Denver voters are saying that they want more nurses to support COVID-19 monitoring, as well as more mental health supports for our students. Voters support increased wages for educators, especially those who not yet have the living wage. Voters want educators to be able to live in the same communities as the students they serve. Voters care about increased funding for ECE and special education services because they want to increase equity and opportunity in our city. So please vote yes for 4A.
Now let's switch gears. Also on the ballot is Referred Measure 4B. On the ballot it reads, without imposing any new taxes, shall Denver Public Schools debt be increased to $795 million with a maximum repayment cost of not more than $1,500 million. Like we did earlier with Referred Measure 4A. We'll begin with 1 minute opening statements from both speakers. And Rob Gould, you're first to speak on Referred Measure 4B.
Thank you. This November, Denver voters have a lot of decisions to make. At the state and national levels, the direction of our country. At the local level, Denver voters will decide on the future of our children, our future Denverites. As a teacher in Denver for nearly a quarter of a century, I'm here to ask Denver voters to vote for the schools that students deserve and to vote yes on Ballot Measure 4B, the Denver Bond. In Denver, schools are at the heart of every community, and we know we have to keep our hearts healthy in order for all of us to thrive. That means that we have to do the crucial work of maintaining and improving our school buildings with the average age of 52 years. Just like you would with your own home, you have to invest to make it better, and the best part is that this measure won't raise taxes. If we have learned one thing from the COVID crisis, it's that we have to be prepared. That includes preparing our buildings for the 21st century.
And now the opening statement from Dr. Arturo Jimenez, speaking against Referred Measure 4B.
Thank you very much. The Measure 4B, I would ask you to vote no. The reason being is that it's difficult to trust the financial, the transparency and spending within Denver Public Schools. This bond is earmarked for $208 million for maintenance. Unfortunately, this has been a revolving door for big-time construction companies and renovation. Every 4 years, they come back and what I like to call fix the old model car that really needs to be replaced. Montbello's been promised a school that may be a comprehensive school. There's been no promises. The air conditioning is really going to be passive solutions. If you look at the asterisk that the district has put forth, there's going to be about $100 million in payback of prior debt with this debt, and it's going to raise the entire debt from $4 billion to $5 billion under the CAFR. And general fund relief of $36 million, tech and safety of $65 million.
Jimenez. You will now have 30 seconds for a rebuttal to Mr. Gould's opening statement.
So it's true, we are in the era of COVID, and that's exactly why we should take pause and ask for DPS and our elected leaders to provide more information about the needs in Denver Public Schools and how this money would be spent. Again, I do believe that they're capable of providing us with sufficient detail. It would be wonderful if we had a forensic accounting of the district that could go back the last 15 or 20 years, including the years when I was on the school board, including the years when Senator Michael Bennett started his political career as DPS superintendent, and look at our bond and debt obligations that we've incurred since then, and let the voters know exactly where we stand.
Thank you, Dr. Jimenez. And Mr. Gould, you now have 30 seconds for a rebuttal of Dr. Jimenez's opening statement.
So we've been together through all those years, and those were very frustrating years. And I'm just happy that those are behind us, and we're starting something new. And I think, one example of that is with the Community Planning and Advisory Committee that actually put all of this together. Our president of our union, Tiffany Choi, she actually was the co-chair of that group. And so I think it's taken a lot of minds to come together to bring this forward, and excited for it to be here.
Now for our cross-examination rounds, beginning with Mr. Rob Gould. You may ask Dr. Jimenez a question, and Arturo, you will have 30 seconds to reply.
So Arturo, I'm curious, what are your solutions to fix these problems? We know that we've tried to change the tax code for years, right? And we haven't done so. And knowing that it will take some time to get those solutions fixed, how can we actually fix it here and now today? What's your solution?
Thank you for asking. I think I've talked to a number of folks. These are not just my personal observations as a former school board member, a parent, an educator myself, but many folks have brought about a lot of consciousness that central administration could be cut back $17.8 million to $21 million just in unneeded administration positions that are on average $133,000 per year. Also, it's been brought to my attention
Thank you, Dr. Jimenez. Your time is up.
Okay.
Now it is your turn. You may ask Mr. Gould a question, and Rob, you will have 30 seconds in your response.
Okay. The question I have is why hasn't the central office administration, why can't they move a large number of their folks at the central administration office out to the schools? Many of them are trained teachers. Many of them are licensed. Many of them have lots to offer to students directly. Why don't they just come down and help the teachers out?
I've got some good news for you, Arturo. They've started that process. In fact, just after the teacher strike in 2019, they moved about 150 personnel into the schools. In fact, I am a teacher coach, and I'm a teacher on special assignment. I actually coach other teachers. I also coach leaders, and we've trained a lot of those people that have come in with our coaching and evaluation system, and they're now in the schools. A lot of those people, those experts with the specialties and expertise. So I'm excited.
Let's continue with cross-examination, and this time, Dr. Jimenez, your turn to ask Rob another question, and Rob, again, you'll have 30 seconds to reply.
Okay, so the school district engages in tax increment financing, where the district allows the developers within the state to take money that from taxes and utilize it for development within the city and county of Denver. how come that money couldn't simply be diverted to bond projects and needed repairs and maintenance within the district?
So, we definitely, there's a lot of things we can talk about with that in terms of like making sure that we have that accountability, because I think that's what I hear in your question is what's the accountability, and when we push that money out, let's make sure that it gets to where it's supposed to be. And that's really why we have that bond oversight committee, in which we actually do have teachers that sit on that committee, and they are overseeing all of those things to make sure that the money gets to where it's supposed to be.
Now, Rob, you may ask Arturo a question, and you will have 30 seconds for your response.
So, Arturo, I'm curious about in 22 out of the 24 schools that would be receiving the air conditioning support, and we have seen those schools actually get air conditioning. I know what you mean about when you were there. We didn't see it, but we have been seeing it. 22 out of 20 of those schools, 24 of those schools, they have free and reduced lunch populations. I guess why is it that those students need to continue to endure those temperatures of 80 degrees or more on a consistent basis? Why can't we do anything now about it?
Actually, we can. Myself included, and many others have proposed a very easy solution to move the school year to start past Labor Day, and that would prevent a lot of maintenance and efficiency issues. Also, we've failed to, like I said, we're maintaining some old model cars, in some instances, some non-historic buildings at the schools, and rather than rebuilding those buildings for those free and reduced lunch populations, we've gone ahead and just done little fixes where we've given them air conditioning in the computer lab or things like that.
And thanks to both of you for your questions and answers during that cross-examination round. Our next couple of rounds will feature our speakers responding to questions submitted by our forum organizers. They will have 1 minute for their answers. Mr. Rob Gould, who is here speaking in support of Referred Measure 4B, you will be first to answer. Due to the pandemic, there are many children at home. One of the greatest barriers to remote learning is internet access, which disproportionately affects Black and Brown students. How will this bond be used to get children internet access for remote learning?
Thank you. So we actually, in Denver, this is a huge problem, and actually we've worked with some of the teachers union has worked with many of the cable companies and to make sure that we can provide additional hotspots and supports. DPS has actually spent a large amount of money this year, $5 million or more, for those hotspots and for those additional computer equipment to make sure that every student has access. Now, we still need to do more, and that's why we need this bond and mill levy money. COVID's going to be with us for a while, and if we can't continue to supply those supports to students, then we don't know where our students will be, and especially those students in our most impacted populations. So that's where those, we continue to put money into that. We need more money for this, and we need more money for other things as well, right? Those trainings in terms of like trainings and support for those computer components and for teaching, everything is on the table.
Thank you, Rob. And now Dr. Arturo Jimenez, who is here speaking against Referred Measure 4B, your response to that question.
Actually, we don't need more money for internet access. You're right that it's a huge problem right now, especially during COVID. I would say that we don't need more nurses to monitor COVID because most parents are asking for remote learning at this time. We've been declared to have a resurgence of COVID that should hit us in the next 2 months. My daughter's school, just today, I received a notice that there was a COVID outbreak at the school, and schools are being closed for this. I have colleagues in other parts of the country that have solved the internet process by putting routers in their school buses and parking them around the district, and thereby cutting out the middlemen like Comcast and others, and providing free internet access to their students at a low cost that doesn't cost millions of dollars like we're asking Denver voters to sustain. I would ask voters to not vote for this and require the school district to find those solutions and utilize tried and true.
Next question from our organizers for our guests, and Dr. Jimenez, you will respond first. You have 1 minute to answer. For the past several years, there has been a Citizens Bond Oversight Committee, which is typically replete with charter school supporters and construction industry insiders. In the past, even with this oversight, funds have not always been deployed consistent with the representations made to voters. How can taxpayers be assured that the same thing won't happen with this bond?
Thank you for the question, and this is really important because we can't be assured by this. We're asking for that assurance. We know that the district has the capability to provide us that. And as soon as they do, I think we'll be in a better place to make a decision about investing in a greater debt for the schools. We have other options that we could take. We can't be assured. And absolutely, those charter school operators and developers and companies are funding this, the vote in favor of this to the tune of $600,000. And there's just a few of us citizens who are speaking up about it. So I would ask you to follow the money, look at the campaign, and see who's putting money in and how much they're putting in, and question what do they have to benefit, and why don't they give that $600,000 directly to the schools?
And now, Mr. Gould, your response to that question.
Yeah, I think that's interesting that there's the claim about putting the money in. We actually, the school board actually came to the teachers and asked for more money from our political fund, and we actually gave it because they are so low in funds. In fact, it almost seems like there's this this entity out there that's making sure that money doesn't get to where it is, so we can inform voters, right? But teachers, they're all in. They're all in on this one because they know how badly we need these funds. It's not something that we just idly ask for, right? We need these supplies. We need all of these things to fix our schools. We need these supports for our students. And so I would there's a lot of conspiracy theories out there, and I just feel like right now everything in politics is just so polarized. We just need to get the politics out of this, and we just need to support our kids.
Let's continue with questions submitted by the forum organizers, and Rob, you will respond first. You have 1 minute for your response. Nearly $100 million of the bond is earmarked for repayment of long-term debt. Based on DPS statements about the average cost of air conditioning for schools, about $3 million per school, why is debt repayment being prioritized over outfitting up to 33 schools with AC?
Actually, I asked this question earlier today. And so one of the reasons why we're doing that, and I actually really support this aspect of it, we are paying off some of those previous so we can get at a lower debt. We actually can save about $400,000 a year by paying those off, and then that frees up other money so that we can actually use it to buy teachers. And we can get mental health supports for our students. So it's a smart move to do that. That's for the money that you're referring to was actually for projects that we're already committed to. Great projects, right? Stuff at like the Northfield campus, the Sandoval campus, right? Finishing off the Kepner piece. So it was needed money. We're refinancing it at a lower rate. It's a smart way to do things. I refinanced my house recently. So we take advantage of what we can and then save money that can actually go to students.
And now, Arturo, your response to that question.
I really appreciate you asking that question, Mr. Gould, and trying to get some clarity on it, because many of us are also asking the question and still wondering how the district can simply say it's refinancing prior debt when it's more like a double mortgage, when many of our schools, the taxpayer-owned schools, are the collateral that have been put up for the rest of this debt. And so we're going to continue to put those schools in danger. When you have a double mortgage, that's different from refinancing your current mortgage. I think we really need the treasurer, Angela Cobain, here from the school board. She should be talking to us about this. Perhaps Mark Ferrandino and other folks who run the financials at the district could give us more clarity around this. And talk to us about what are certificates of participation. Are they really just playing the stock market with our schools, with our properties?
And that brings us to the end of our Q&A segment for Referred Measure 4B, and we now move to closing statements. And we will reverse the order of opening statements, which means we will begin with Dr. Arturo Jimenez. You have 1 minute for your closing statement on 4B.
Thank you very much for doing a wonderful job of moderating and cutting us off when you needed to. I appreciate that. We need that in some other forums. Again, I asked the taxpayers to ask the questions about how could DPS tighten their belt by removing unneeded central administrators, sending more to the schools. I'm happy that they've sent some folks, but they could send more. Talk to them about the reserves of $100 million and why that is there. I think many of the same Denver residents are asking the question of RTD, why they have a $300 million reserve. There's a comparison there. And there are a lack of answers. Also, to see why do we have to do tax increment financing and why can't we recall those? How come the marijuana money is not getting to the schools? How come the BEST program hasn't been used for capital construction within the city? It's just for rural areas. And I ask folks not to vote based on fear of COVID or guilt that this is going to hurt children. But I think by being fiscally interested, we'll do best by our children. Thank you.
And now a closing statement from Mr. Rob Gould. Rob, you have 1 minute for your closing statement on 4B.
So, as a teacher coach, I've been in nearly every single building in Denver. I've seen some amazing transformations with the money that we've used, transformations of learning environments, and I've seen how our kids have benefited from those environments. I think about the lunchroom renovations at JFK and how that space was transformed into an inclusive environment for students to collaborate and build community. That community is what we need for all of our schools. Looking to the future, I think about the 24 schools that will receive air conditioning and how those students will be able to attend to their studies. I think about the technology that our schools need to keep pace and stay safe. I think about the Montbello community and how that community deserves a new campus. I think about all of the students that won't have these opportunities if we let politics drive our decision making. Our students deserve these resources. Let's keep politics out of our schools and vote yes on 4B.
On behalf of the forum organizers, I'd like to thank you both for your participation in this forum. We hope we have given you a fair look at the pro and con arguments for referred measures 4A and 4B. Again, Measure 4A asks voters, shall Denver Public Schools taxes be increased by up to $32 million in tax year 2021 and by the amounts in any year thereafter that are raised a mill levy of 4 mills. In Measure 4B, voters, without imposing any new taxes, shall Denver Public Schools debt be increased to $795 million with a maximum repayment cost of not more than I'm sorry. Can we start that over? You can tell me where to start. I think I missed something in the... David, did I miss something in the... Okay. Okay. Huh?
That's not the actual measure. It's not usually copies it straight from.
Okay, I'm hearing it's not. No, I am hearing you. I have someone here who says it's not the actual measure language. Okay, yeah, it is a piece of it. Okay, we can just start from the thank yous. I'm sorry. All right. All right, let me know when. 3, 2, 1. On behalf of the forum organizers, I'd like to thank you both for your participation in this forum. We hope we have given you a fair look at the pro and con arguments for referred measures 4A and 4B. Again, Measure 4A asks voters, shall Denver Public Schools taxes be increased by up to $32 million in tax year 2021 and by the amounts in any year thereafter that are raised from a mill levy of 4 mills. And Measure 4B asks voters, without imposing any new tax, shall Denver Public Schools debt be increased to $795 million with a maximum repayment cost of not more than than $1,500 million. Our thanks also to the Denver Decides partners, which include Inter-Neighborhood Cooperation and the League of Women Voters of Denver. Denver Decides is presented by Denver 8 TV. Remember, Election Day is Tuesday, November 3rd. Let your voice be heard, be sure you are registered, and be sure to vote. For complete election information online, go to denverdecides.org. I'm Micah Smith with Denver 7. Thanks for joining us.